Welcome to the Toastmasters Experience. My name is Evelyn. Get inspired by today's Toastmasters insights. Enjoy the show. And welcome to another episode of the Toastmasters Experience. I'm excited and delighted to have someone in my studio today. You know, I love it when I have people in my studio. It just makes the whole experience much more exciting. I have got in the studio with me today a young man by the name of Dean, who I had the pleasure of meeting last week at the Western Division competition. He won first in table topics, and he also placed second in evaluation. I loved the way he spoke, and I thought, oh my gosh, he's got to be on my podcast, and I want him now. So welcome to the show, Dean. Welcome so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Evelyn.
How long have you been a Toastmasters, and what clubs are you currently in?
So I have been a Toastmaster for 8 months now, and I belong to the Quakers Hill Toastmasters Club.
So what motivated you to join Toastmasters?
It started back probably around 10 years, so it's been a long journey. The motivation started around the first time I got a real job, which was in the federal government. And I remember I experienced what many would call a panic attack. And it occurred in meetings. And I think the driver was the fact that I felt out of place in government. And so I'd hear words thrown around like efficiency dividends. And I remember getting on the phone to my mum and being like, Mum, I don't belong here. I need to get out. I can't even introduce myself in a meeting. I feel that out of place. And that sort of spiraled into this constant fear of any time I had a meeting with a stakeholder or even a boss, I would genuinely be so nervous where my breath was short. I'd feel the sweat. Funnily enough, there was a little detour before Toastmasters. And that detour was, I spoke to a friend of a friend who worked at a pharmacy, and he gave me a little pill called propranolol. So I'm not sure, Evelyn, have you heard of that?
No, I haven't.
So propranolol is a beta blocker, and what it does is it reduces the physical symptoms of anxiety. So it stops you from sweating, and it stops your heart rate from racing. And something that's a fun fact is it actually works really well for performers. A lot of performers use it, whether it's a musician or whether it's a public speaker. I started using it for speeches. I'd do best man speeches at weddings, or I'd have to give presentations at work. And the thing is, I do really well, but if it weren't for the pills in my pocket, I'd crumble. There was almost this shame that was attached to the fact that I'm hiding this thing from everyone. They think I'm a really good speaker, but I'm actually relying on a drug. And if I don't have that, I feel fragile. And I feel like if I have to get up and speak in front of an audience and I forgot my pills that day, I'd have a meltdown and I'd be found out. I remember getting to a point where the shame was the thing that was the large motivator in this, more so than the fear. And I remember speaking to an assistant secretary. So that's quite a high level in the government. Mm-hmm. And I remember walking up to him and I said, "You're such a fantastic speaker." He emceed events. Yeah. And I said, "Were you just born with the gift of the gab? Like, it just feels natural to you." Yeah. And he said to me, "Dean, when I started, I couldn't even introduce myself." And he goes, "You know what I did? I joined a club called Toastmasters." Oh, okay. And I remember thinking, interesting, I haven't heard of that. So I got home and I opened up my laptop and I went on and I saw this club, and I remember thinking, all right, I'm going to give it a go. And that thing that they say, the biggest and the scariest part is walking in, is true. Yeah. It's that first step that you take. Yeah. I took that first step and I haven't looked back since.
Now, I've never heard of that pill, that drug, and we're not promoting drug use here. But so how long did you actually take that drug?
So this is something that, again, previously I would have been embarrassed to admit it. Yeah. But even as recent as 2 years ago, I used it for my wedding vows. I was that afraid. And when I talk about the fear, I learned that it wasn't just public speaking. It was afraid of social evaluation. And so I was so afraid of being judged and evaluated or found out as being nervous. And that was actually the driver. I was so afraid of looking nervous and so afraid of being a bit short of breath or whatever that it would then crumble. I remember using it up until my wedding, pretty much my wedding day. And then I just made this decision, I can't keep going like this. If I want to pursue opportunities, I don't want to feel like I'm so reliant on having these pills. And something that they don't tell you about when you use those medications, you can't drink, you can't really eat as much as you'd like to. And so it does stifle the actual day. It stifles the experience. And I wanted to get to a point where I could express myself without being so fragile, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. So you joined Toastmasters only 8 months ago. So that's amazing. And can you just describe to me your first speech experience without propranolol?
Yes. So my first speech was the icebreaker speech. And it was actually me retelling that story about how it came to be. And it was the first time I shared that I'd actually used propranolol in front of an audience. I remember watching, I love motivational videos. I remember watching a video of a fighter, for those at home who know, GSP. And he actually said this one thing that stuck with me. He said, "I'm no longer afraid to say that I'm afraid." And for me, and I got goosebumps even just saying that, because for me, it's been the most liberating thing of my life, being able to be up there and be so vulnerable, where it's almost like it takes away the ammo from the other people that I was so afraid that were going to judge me, which they probably wouldn't have, but you know, you're always your own worst critic. So
that's so true. It's so true, because everything is so in your head, and you do think that people will see your nervousness, but they really don't.
It's so true.
It's all internal. After that first speech experience, what did you think? Like, oh my God, I've wasted so many years taking this drug and I didn't need it.
Yes. So funnily enough, when I did that speech, I had people come up to me and ask me about the name of the drug because they wanted to go and get it. But I was trying to say that the whole point of the story was that drug actually made me fragile. And what makes you anti-fragile, I call it, is by being able to do it without those perfect conditions and being able to accept those nerves and use them to your advantage. Okay. So, sorry, what was the question again? I just want to go back to that.
Sorry. How did you feel after?
Yes. So there's two founding members at Quakers Hill, Tony and Liz, who I love. And they actually gave me a standing ovation after my icebreaker speech, which I had other members come up and tell me that is extremely rare for a first speech. And I remember it was one of the first times where I felt so proud of myself, but also to have that external validation that maybe I have a gift here. Maybe that internal voice that was always driving me to try. I would ruminate over public speaking more than any person I've ever met.
Right.
And I used to think, why do I always get so upset with myself for the nerves? And it was because I knew that I had a story to express, but I just wasn't doing it. And I was trying to be like other people, or I was trying to sound like other people. And when I did a speech where I was just me and I was vulnerable and I told my story, to be praised and for that to be well received, that was the confidence I needed to just start moving forward.
And it's the connection. You know, as soon as you have that connection with the audience, and it usually only happens when you tell a personal story.
Yes.
So if you're telling someone else's story or just recounting whatever, it doesn't work. It's got to be your personal story.
100%. And on that, I learnt over the years that you can be 20% less polished and professional, but if you're an extra 20% vulnerable, that will make all the difference. That is more impressive. Really understanding that, because it takes a lot of the pressure off, because even with something like a podcast like this, I have the internal thoughts of, okay, how should I sound? But when you are confident enough to just have that vulnerability and share who you are, that's actually the competitive advantage, just being yourself.
Yep.
Yeah,
definitely. I so agree with that. Now, I was really impressed with your evaluation. I know you didn't win, but hey, second is good for a division competition, and you've only been a member for 8 months. That is amazing. But I was so impressed with your evaluation. Now, can you just give me a few tips and tricks, what you were listening for, or do you have something in your head when you're evaluating a speech?
Yeah, so there's actually a structure that I use that works really well. And that's quite difficult evaluation within the time limit. You've only got, say, 3 minutes to really go through a range of points. The way that I structure it is the first, I'd say maybe 20 to 25 seconds, focus on what was the purpose of the speech or what was the message that the speech was trying to go through. So you could start off and say, this speech started off as a story about the Blue Mountains, but it became a deeper metaphor for overcoming your fear. And so that already shows the audience that you've picked up on the underlying layer of the speech. Mm-hmm. And then when I go into the next part, that would be the 2 strengths. I think it's really important to have a positive attitude to what did the speaker bring to the table. So when they leave, they can really harness in on those strengths and leverage them. I really have a few go-tos that I always try to look for, one of which is humor. I really love when people integrate humor because for me, it's something that really demonstrates confidence and it brings a level of psychological safety for the audience as well. I know for myself, that has been one of the hardest things to integrate into my own speaking is humor, because I feel like you really do need to be confident enough to play around and be playful with the audience. Following the 2 strengths, I go into 2 recommendations. And so I make it really, I carefully word it so it's not received as a flaw, but received as a recommendation that can elevate a speech. And so that might be purposeful stage movement. It might be even vulnerability, because you do notice that a lot of people might focus a bit too much on the information density as opposed to the storytelling. Once you've gone through the message, the strengths, and then the recommendations, then just tying it all up with a summary to show the markers or to show the audience that you've done that full holistic view of evaluation of the actual speaker.
I can't remember if you used your notes or not. Did you use your notes or did you memorize it?
I would write notes and I would only look back to them maybe, I'd say 3 or 4 times.
Right, right.
I think that you could definitely do it without notes.
Yeah.
Just with I think the pressure that comes with competition, sometimes you can go a bit blank. And even in that competition, what threw me off was the microphone. That was really difficult to get used to. And that was the first time I actually used one of those mics.
Right.
Yeah, just hearing the static and not being in control of that was quite difficult.
Yes. And probably the only reason you didn't win is because the person who did win didn't use her notes.
Yes. Yeah.
So there you go. This is the very first time you have competed.
Yes.
In a competition.
It is, yeah.
So, kudos to you. I love your words and your language. So obviously is that something you do as a job?
So not really, actually. So I've been working, I guess when I say not really, in terms of storytelling.
Yeah.
However, I do have to speak for my job. I obviously work with a lot of stakeholders in the Department of Health, and we fund a range of alcohol and drug organizations. And so I'm often speaking with them. So yeah, it's something that I do get a lot of experience with, just tailoring the way that I communicate to a different audience.
Wow. Sorry, this makes this even more interesting. So Department of Health, and you were taking this drug.
Yes, I know. It's ironic, isn't it? And yeah.
Totally ironic. I love that. Now, what do you love most about Toastmasters?
I think what I love most about it is the way it's structured so strategically. And at the start, I don't think I necessarily understood it. But when I started to look at the different tasks that you were assigned, being a chair or doing a table topic, I loved how it really does teach you to push yourself towards discomfort in a safe environment. And even just the clapping at the end of every time you speak, that positive reinforcement just teaches your brain, like, this is a safe place, and that momentum just carries with you. So I would definitely say that, and also the community. I was really looking for, because I only moved back to Sydney actually a year and a half ago. I remember thinking, I said to my wife, I need a community around here. Like, I just need people that are like-minded. And when I went to Toastmasters, I'd bring up books that I was reading, and almost everyone was like, I love that book, or I love that speak. Like, I'd bring up T.D. Jakes and Les Brown and these motivational speakers. And everyone seemed to know who I was referring to. And I was like,
Yeah,
it was just that time where you feel like, this is where I belong.
Yes.
And so belonging is a massive one.
Yeah. Actually, you've just segued into my next question. So you share resources, tools that have changed your life as far as public speaking goes?
There are a few key speakers that have really helped me. One is Vin Jiang, who I've actually taken his communication course, and also Jefferson Fisher. And so one thing that Jefferson Fisher said that I feel like transformed my approach with speaking was the less you try to impress, the more impressive you become. And it completely blew my mind because so much of my life, I've tried so hard to impress people and I've tried so hard to be like people that I'm not like. Yeah. And as soon as I leaned into just being myself and just honestly having the goal of being loyal to myself as the principle, and the outcome you can't control. But if you can align yourself with your values and being loyal to yourself, if that's your measurement stick, then there's no pressure because you're genuinely just trying to be vulnerable and honest to yourself. And that has been transformative with my speaking.
What pathway are you following right now in Toastmasters?
This is where I'm going to get pulled up a little bit. Okay. So I haven't been as structured with my pathways as I should be. Yeah. However, I'll be doing, I think it's my 4th speech tomorrow. It has been really interesting looking at the different types of speeches that you're asked to do, because obviously we all lean to one strength. And it's been really interesting trying to find ways where even being imaginative, I think I was just saying to my wife, I don't think I've ever read a fictional book from start to finish. And so when it comes to doing speeches that are imaginative and really creative, I struggle so much, but I enjoy putting myself in that discomfort at times just to show that I can. And it's more so for the fact of being comfortable with uncomfortable conditions. I really do enjoy having that safe environment to play around, but at the same time, I really do think that you should leverage your strengths where possible. And if you've got a strength, there's no need to change it.
Something I heard years ago is that, because I love to read lots of nonfiction books, which sounds like you do as well. So someone said, you should start reading fiction books because they really help your speaking. So I've started to do that as well because it does help with the flowering of the language. So reading books is a really good idea. Fiction, yes. Not just nonfiction. Yes. What has been something about Toastmasters that has totally surprised you?
That has totally surprised, I think, honestly, table topics. Where that has surprised me is that at the start, I would get questions like, if you were a worm for a day, what would you do? And I remember thinking, this is ridiculous. In what context, in what world is this going to be relevant to me, or is this going to help me with my speaking skills? Through those questions, what it taught me was it's almost, you build a set of evidence where you become confident with the unknown. And that's something that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. Like it could be a podcast where you don't know the questions, or it could be a question from a stakeholder that you're not familiar with. And when you get into the habit of self-trust and just trusting that you have an instinct, run with it. Right. And being okay with that imperfection at times. Because for me, I am someone who I would often beat myself up if I didn't do it exactly how I wanted to. But with table topics, you don't get that opportunity. You have to play around. You might have to go with your first idea, which isn't the best. You might sit down and have a better idea, but life doesn't work like that. And so really understanding that value of being able to be impromptu and roll with the punches, that has been transformative.
I loved the question that you got for table topics because it was, what would your 10-year-old self tell you today? And you're very young, and I'm thinking, I thought you were a lot younger than you actually are. So I thought, what's he going to say? I mean, he's as old as my son, So I was really, tell us what you actually said.
What I said was, if the why is strong enough, the how is easy. And for me, when I reflect on the why of my journey, of why I wanted to get into public speaking, the first was expression, because I really wanted to be able to express my stories because I felt that it was unique and that other people could relate to it. And so really having that strong desire to turn my pain into a purpose. And then the second was fear of regret. And that was such a strong fear that I had because I wrestle with anxiety quite often, as I'm sure most people do. And having seen my father, who recently passed, I'd say 7.5 months ago, having been confronted with mortality, with his mortality, with my own mortality, I really had this sense of urgency that I don't want to die with regret. And one of my biggest regrets, and I think for most people, is if they don't express themselves through life and if they don't live in alignment with their values. And one of my core values is courage. And the definition of courage is not getting rid of fear, it's moving towards fear, and it's being able to overcome fear and almost doing things in spite of fear. For me, I would say when I was going back to that 10-year-old self, it was more of a reminder that, look, it is going to be extremely difficult. It is going to feel like war. Yeah,
I saw exactly why you won, even though the person who placed second is from my club, but that's okay. That's okay. But no, you were absolutely, I thought it was such a great answer. And I thought, what a mature response, very vulnerable. And I love that you answered that. And it gives me hope because you're a young man and you can express yourself well. Because sometimes I think about how we're communicating now, like it's all via text, AI, and, sometimes I feel Toastmasters, we don't have that younger sort of generation coming through. But from your club, I noticed quite a few young people or, in their 30s, late 20s maybe. And that just gives me so much hope because I do worry about the way people are communicating now. So it really did give me some hope. What do you think? Because you are in this generation, what do you think about that, how people are communicating now?
I remember reading that we're the most connected ever when it comes to a global context, but on the local context, we're more disconnected than ever. And I think the obvious answers are we've obviously got used to being on our phone and that cheap dopamine, and that can actually stifle going out into the real world and communicating with other people. And my wife and I were speaking about it earlier, that sometimes you do see, especially with the younger generation, that there is an enhanced fear with speaking to people at work or being able to give presentations purely because of the lack of exposure, but also the fear of judgment. And again, we're in this era where if you do put yourself out there, you're exposed to judgment at a scale that we're not used to. Yeah. And then also you've got the comparison issue of seeing a story that isn't always accurate, but can make you feel like you're not enough or that you're below what other people are doing.
Yeah, definitely. Something I've actually noticed with our Toastmasters Club is that we do have younger people in our club, your age and a little bit younger. But the speeches are becoming so vulnerable now. And I think it's because we aren't feeling that connection that we used to feel, just going out to the grocery shop and, talking to the person who's checking out our groceries or talking to the saleskeeper. We don't have that sort of, or talking to our neighbors. We don't have that anymore because we're too busy on our phones, or even talking on the train. No one talks on the train ever, So,
and even phone calls.
Yeah.
No one wants to take a phone call. It's like, text me.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I've noticed in our Toastmasters Club, the vulnerability that's coming through in the speeches and even the table topics. It's crazy. It's like, oh my God, that's amazing, So there is definitely something, I think, happening in the world now where people are seeing that.
Yes, and I think that a lot of influencers, you can call them in quotation marks, because they are now starting to put out that vulnerability. And before we had magazines where we'd see celebrities, but we wouldn't be privy to their inner thoughts. Now they're being vulnerable and courageous enough to share online their anxieties and their struggles. And that gives someone like us the courage to then talk about our own story, but also it normalizes the feeling. If we think that our feelings aren't what are expected or natural in these particular environments, then we're going to judge ourselves. There's going to be shame, and it's just going to prevent us from taking the next step. But if you see a celebrity or someone that you look up to come out and say, you know what, Dean, I've been doing this for 30 years and I still get the butterflies. I still get the nerves, but I do it scared. That can make all the difference.
Yeah, definitely. I'm so excited for your generation, only because I've met someone like you and my son as well. He's a little bit younger than you, but also has joined Toastmasters and he speaks well. Okay, so you've only been a member for 8 months.
Yes.
Have you looked into the leadership opportunities, or are you just focusing on your speaking?
So I have been asked to consider leadership responsibilities within the club, which I'm definitely open to. I really love mentoring.
Yes.
And so that's something that I think is definitely down the track for me. I've actually just started to pivot when it comes to career into so recently, I should have mentioned earlier, but I've done a master's in counseling with the intent to work with people with public speaking anxiety. So I'm actually really looking to be able to work with professionals or even younger high school age or university age students, just to help people understand that you truly can change your relationship with fear and speaking. And for me, that's been my biggest why. It's been such a motivator.
So when you did this master's course, was there a number one fear that you found why people are afraid of public speaking?
Yeah. So I think that it is different for everyone. But as I've mentioned before, I think that people think that it's a fear of public speaking, but it often is deeper than that. It's a fear of social evaluation. It is a fear of the judgment that comes with it, and something that has honestly really changed my relationship with speaking was understanding, you know how they say when you go in to give a speech, you got to break the ice. The issue with that is there is an underlying assumption that the crowd is icy. When you can reframe that into the audience are friendly, the audience are looking to see me do well, that can completely change your interpretation of an event. Through the counseling, you do learn through narrative therapy, through cognitive behavioral therapy, that often situations like public speaking, it's not an experience of the event itself. It's the experience of our traumas and how the lens that we view the world. And if we can change that lens, and if we can walk into a situation with that little bit more optimism and positivity, that truly does transform your experience, because the brain can't tell the difference between that imagined and that real experience.
So with the master's in counseling that you received, what were the key things that you learned?
Ones that I could directly relate to public speaking would be obviously exposure therapy. And so what Toastmasters gives is exposure to discomfort on a regular basis. And as you know, if you've got a fear of snakes, if you gradually expose yourself to snakes, they gradually become less scary. The same works for public speaking. And that is why it is so important to go to Toastmasters or to put yourself in environments where it is uncomfortable, because each time you do it, even if it's a bit imperfect and impolished, each time you do that, you give yourself evidence that you can go towards that scary thing. Some people think that it's as simple as staring into the mirror and saying how great you are at public speaking, whereas confidence is bred through evidence of how many times you've actually gone and done something that is, you've been running towards that fear, and it gives you that time. So when you've then got another scary thing that pops up, you can look back at that evidence and it can bring a sense of calm, because you go, I've been here before. I've had these intrusive thoughts before and I've been able to do it. That evidence is so key, I find, in terms of really building confidence within yourself.
Okay, so you're pivoting your career now. How are you going to attract clients?
As my wife knows, I am a massive overthinker. I have been sitting on this idea for quite a long time now. And I think that the Toastmasters journey has given me the confidence to just be seen and put myself out there and be exposed and judged. I only just started a page to start building my network and starting to get my name out there. And one thing that I knew was no one is going to take me seriously unless there is some form of credibility, unless there is some evidence for, okay, this person can help me.
Yeah.
And so even with my first post, it came after winning that event because I was like, well, otherwise it's going to be so hard to articulate to potential clients, this person is a good speaker, this person has been through anxiety and overcome it. And so I really wanted to have that evidence base, as we discussed before.
Yeah.
And so that has just given me this propelled motivation to just run with it and really be comfortable just, again, being seen and expressing myself and being okay with people getting to see that anxious side, because it's something that I have tried to hide for such a long time of my life, but it genuinely is liberating the more vulnerable I've become.
Yeah, I do definitely think vulnerability is the key to everything. And I know that you were very vulnerable during your interview, and you did share that your father was actually in prison. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so my father had a very colorful and exciting life.
Okay.
And when I was growing up, he did go to prison for a period of time. And my mum, God bless her, worked 2 jobs and has always supported myself and my brother. What I think I experienced was, because I was the older brother, maybe I didn't have my father figure at home at certain periods of my life. And he also, I haven't mentioned, he went through 20 years of cancer. So there was a lot of struggle in terms of him being able to be as present or active as he possibly could. Not having that male role model, I think, made life very scary for me. And I went through it suffering a lot in my own head, my own thoughts, with anxiety and feeling so fragile with everything I did. I just remember not being able to enjoy any opportunity because I was so worried that if I didn't get it perfect, if I didn't get it right, that was a failure. And so not only would it tarnish before the event, it would then tarnish after an event because I'd feel so much shame about what I experienced, and I wouldn't be able to enjoy my wins. The reason why I pivoted into counseling was because I feel like my calling on earth is to be an older brother to people.
Yeah.
Because I never had that older brother. And that is where this whole motivation, that's where the why is stronger than the how. Like it all resonates and comes from that. And so my family have been so pivotal in just inspiring me in their own ways. But yeah, also just reminding me that it's our story and you can be proud of your story no matter, everyone's got different little idiosyncrasies, you might put it, but really I feel so happy to be at a point where I'm just happy with sharing these stories because it is me and it is what created me. It is what created the speeches that I'm able to give. Yeah. And so you end up becoming thankful for the difficult times in your life.
Yeah, you do, because you learn the most from them, and others, when they listen to your story, they'll learn as well. So how do you balance Toastmasters? Because it obviously is a bit of a time commitment and you are starting this new business.
Someone, when I first joined Toastmasters, said to me, you will leave the session so activated and energized, more so than before you walked in, that it will be very difficult to sleep. And that has been true, especially for the first part. And I noticed that I would go to Toastmasters on a Monday night, and Tuesday I would be absolutely spent, exhausted, because I would come home so energetic and I just couldn't sleep. But what I've realized is that there is always a sacrifice to be made. There is always a price to pay. And again, if that why is strong enough, you are willing to sacrifice sleep. I've started to really look at the people, whether it's public speakers I admire. They have to do podcasts sometimes on 2 hours sleep. They have to do it tired. And anything great that you've seen created has been done by tired people. Just experiencing that, and even with the competition, I remember it was my worst night of sleep of the whole year. And I thought, how am I going to perform in this? But getting that evidence that you can do it in imperfect conditions, fantastic. So back to the question. Sorry, I know I drift a bit, but back to the question, I would say that I think that it does come with a very small price, but it has huge upside. And that's actually, this is a little plug. This is the reason why I actually called my business Asymmetry Coaching.
Okay.
Because public speaking to me has limited downside. You might feel embarrassed for a moment. You might be judged.
Yeah.
But the upside is disproportionate. And it's not only in your professional life, it's in your personal life. It's in how you feel about yourself and being able to express. And I think that when you understand that going into Toastmasters or public speaking is an asymmetrical bet, there is limited downside and there is disproportionate upside, it really just makes you think, what do I have to lose?
Exactly. And so asymmetry coaching, is that what you called it? Yeah.
That's correct. Yes.
And is it, if somebody is listening now and they say, hey, I need some help, can they contact you now, or is it just in the development?
So it is in the early development stage, but they can contact me now via LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. And I think that once I start to get a bit of momentum rolling, I'm actually taking long service leave from my current job to really start and focus on building up that business. So once that's done, I'll have the website up and running. But at the moment, there is actually a way to book a session online through Calendly, and also just via DM on LinkedIn.
Okay. So I will have all of those contact details on my show notes if you'd like to contact Dean via LinkedIn. And I guess you said there's a Calendly link. But anyways, we'll have that all on the show notes. So it's been such a pleasure. It really has. I feel so honored. I do feel I am in the midst of greatness. I really do feel that.
I feel honored being on. This is my first podcast, and I feel honored to be here.
So I'm going to ask you my question that I always end the interview with. What advice would you give someone who is considering joining Toastmasters?
The advice I would give is to really ponder on the quote, life does not reward intelligence, life rewards action. And the way you can take action is through joining your local Toastmasters Club, because you could read 10 books on public speaking, but a couple of sessions of Toastmasters will trump that every day of the week. And I will always stand by that. And that is where I have seen the most growth, through the actual exposure. And there is no better place than Toastmasters to practice in a safe environment and to have such a positive and supportive community.
Yeah. I love it. Thank you so much, Dean. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your company. Please tune in next time to the Toastmasters Experience.